I'd like you to think of something specific.
Do I have to close my eyes?
It doesn't matter.
All right, yes, I have something.
Yes.
Welcome to the bigger picture.
Good morning.
What movie that is?
Which movie was that? I'd never seen that movie.
I didn't play it completely because then his head explodes. But it's the 80s movie Scanners. It's a classic.
Oh, okay. I've never seen it. I'm gonna watch it today.
Yeah, it's a nice movie. It's a horror, of course, and it has to do with psychic powers and unlocking the mind, which is the topic of today, because today we're going to talk about the telepathy tapes.
Yeah. Telepathy tapes are hit right now. Everybody's just talking about them. Even Joe Rogan brought the creator of that series on, like, of that podcast on her show.
Yeah,
So I basically watched the podcast. It was really cool.
yeah. I did my homework. We have been talking about the telepathy or mentioning the telepathy tapes for a while now. So this show will be dedicated to it, and I got a
Yeah.
really nice show.
Yeah,
For
we have
you
been
guys.
mentioning it for like weeks now, like for multiple, like 3 or 4 shows actually.
Yeah, but we have to do our homework, right? So
Yeah,
we can't just jump into it.
exactly.
So, but before we do that, we wanted to talk a little bit about what's happening in the market. We'll keep it short, but everything is pumping.
Everything is pumping thanks to Trump strategic reserve. Now, what I think is going to be way more than that, because if US is doing that, everyone else will follow it. So you will see Russia, China, India, Dubai, Saudi Arabia, they all will make their crypto strategy, like strategic reserves, which means higher pumps for us because we are older in the market, right? We have been here for like 3 4 years now. 4 years.
True, and of course
Actually,
he
5 years now. It's 2025.
and just before we started, I was kind of shocked that he didn't mention Bitcoin, but then you corrected me and he said like later on he did mention that he would
So
include
he
Bitcoin.
did a quote tweet of his original tweet on his
Mhm.
like Truth Social, and then he said like, "Of course, Bitcoin and crypto are my favorite, and they are going to be there." And then I think I've read another tweet. I don't know if it's from Trump or someone else, that more coins to come. So
Oh
there is
wow,
a yeah. So it's not just stick to these five. I think what's gonna happen, he gonna add all those tokens
yeah,
which he used to get donations on his
yeah.
campaign. Remember in his campaign he had like 10, 15 crypto he was accepting. So I think he gonna add them in there, because I think if it's good enough to have, like, if it's good enough for him to take donations from, I think it's good enough for US to have as an
Yeah,
strategic reserve.
yeah, and probably they will be US coins mostly, or US based coins as they are called. But
Yeah.
the first three that were mentioned were Solana, XRP, and Cardano of all coins.
Yeah.
ADA.
I
I
think
think
it's,
it pumped like 70% or 70+% in one day.
no,
Crazy.
not 70%. It's $1. So actually it was
No,
down from $1.
no.
So it's not that much. Also, I think it's not Trump, it's David Sachs, because David Sachs loved these coins.
Hmm.
So, oh, it's 60%. You're right.
Yeah, and I think it came down a little bit because it was
Yeah.
it was actually higher.
Wow. Holy shit. I didn't know that it was so down. I would have bought it. Because because like when the crypto started to go down, I said I'm not gonna check anything, my portfolio. So I didn't check anything. I didn't know that Cardano was that down. I would have put.
We just had a rough spot, but people who have been following Crypto Landy or Christopher Inc. or Fibo Swanee or many other people, they sort of pointed out that we were in this correction, and this was sort of the last flush out, and then
Yeah.
you had the three-way correction downwards, and most likely we're going up, and yes, we're going up. So. And then the higher we go, the better. I think
Yeah.
around 130, 150 if we're lucky. But that will take a bit before we're there.
No, what I think when is the Bitcoin started to dump, the CEO of Bitgate is like one of the best exchanges right now. She said Bitcoin have to hit 80K so it can go to 150K, and it hit 180K. It actually went 70. Now I think we can see 150K.
I like it. Okay, let's move on.
Let's move on.
So the telepathy tapes, to give people an idea about what those are, I'm going to play a short clip, a promo clip from them.
The people that would be most likely to exhibit it would be nonverbal autistic children. And it turns out that I might be right. The video you're looking at shows the experimental setup we had last spring. Haley, a 10-year-old severely autistic child, and her therapist are seated alone in the room, together at a table and separated by a tall partition that prevents eye-to-eye or physical contact. Cards with randomized numbers, words, sentences, pictures, and equations were hidden until the experiment. The therapist viewed them one by one on her side of the visual barrier and then asked Haley what she was thinking or looking at. Haley pointed with her wooden pencil inside characters on stencils with her right hand to select them, and then entered them with her left into a device that converts text to speech. You'll notice that there are no characters for division signs, equal signs, or decimal points, so the therapist had to tell Haley when these occurred. You'll also notice that her answer is 100% accurate on 18 out of 18 digits. This is just one of 10 equations that she did in a 10-minute period, with accuracy above 90% each time.
Anyway, it goes on for a little bit longer. Did you see any of the telepathy tapes?
Not all of them, some of them.
Yeah.
Like, I didn't get it because it's like a whole series, like 10 episodes in there.
True.
So I started it. But what I recently watched is like the Joe Rogan podcast, because Joe Rogan podcast is very good to summarize everything in there.
Yeah.
So it's like a good thing to watch before the show.
So you also got a lot of critics, and we have to mention the critics. And the things that they usually point out is that there are subtle cues and ideomotor effects or facilitated communication, and of course that the caregivers are often there at the scene and usually also in a home setting.
Yeah, but they call spellers, and they needed them because they are disabled people. They are not the regular people, so they need those people. Now the critics can go fuck themselves, because seriously, they are literally exploiting the disability of the people, because they're disabled people. They need spellers to do those things. Like if it
Yeah.
was a regular person with who can communicate or do all of those things, I have like a normal regular human, then I would have understand their critics. But their critics right now is bullshit. And also they do that all the time. These atheistic minded people who have destroyed humanity with their ideology that it's only science that means, and you should trust the science. We all have suffered enough from their trust the sign narrative, and there is no god, universe it is what it is, and you die, the lights are off, that's it. I am done with their, and I'm not even talking about like losers, I'm talking about even big scientists. Like all of them has fooled us. They are like a spawn of satans. Never trust a scientist and critics.
Yeah, okay, but some of the criticisms are good and some are understandable, but the problem is most of it is kind of misinformed, or they only get a little snapshot of what they actually did. And
Yes.
we're gonna talk about that, and well, let's listen to like one of these critics.
Okay, let's go ahead.
And he makes some good points. It's this guy, just a random guy from the internet. He's also autistic, because it's about autistic children, of course, with speech impairment.
That is, hasty conclusions drawn from anecdotal evidence, single studies, or cherry-picked data. We see appeals to authority, a nurse, an educated lecturer, a charismatic documentary producer, This implies they must be right. And emotional or mystical hooks that bypass our critical thinking. This is anti-intellectualism in action, ignoring robust, peer-reviewed science in favor of quick fix narratives or sensational claims.
Yeah, so he's nothing against this person.
Not this person, but I think this person is brainwashed. And secondly, peer-reviewed science was, we have seen all the COVID fiasco or the vaccine fiasco. So that peer-reviewed thing doesn't mean anything anymore. Secondly, what he's saying, just because that person is good, like documentary or filmmaker, it doesn't mean he's legit. Also, he's implying that that person is trying to scam everyone on earth. It's also his criticism is based on assumption that that person, like the creator of that lady, basically is scamming everyone, which is by default is not a like it's a how will I say, it's not a good criticism, because you are already biased towards one argument that that person is scamming, and then you're trying to find it. And don't give me peer reviewed science, because peer reviewed science has given us nothing.
Yeah,
Bullshit.
and Diane Powell, who sort of did the telepathy tapes, she's a neuropsychologist.
Yeah.
There's also some really interesting interviews, like you said, the one with Joe Rogan, and I think she also did some others, which are definitely worth watching. And she has some really cool ideas, and she did a lot of research. So
Yeah.
and one of the things that the critics mentioned, and then I don't know if you know him, but there was this horse which was called Kluge Hans, a German horse back in the start of the 20th century. And I heard the story. I knew about the story, but I never really looked into it. That's this story.
I don't know. Tell me the story. Sounds interesting.
I'm gonna put it up here. Clever Hans was his name. So it's about this horse, and this horse was able to solve mathematical puzzles, or what equations and that kind of stuff. I'm not sure how difficult they were. I can't imagine that they were too difficult.
It's a horse. If it's 1 + 1 = 2, that's a impossible calculation for a horse.
Okay, yeah. So, but the point is, Clever Hans was unmasked by this person. What was his name again? Oscar Fungst, and he demonstrated. Well, what he demonstrated was that the horse was not actually performing these mental tasks. Okay, that's what he said, but was actually watching the reactions of his trainer, and the horse was responding directly to involuntary cues in the body language of the human trainer, who was entirely unaware that he was providing such clues to his horse. So I find that truly remarkable, because I thought he was like a charlatan or a fraudster, right? That he was actually tricking his audience with the horse. That was sort of my understanding of this story. I never looked into it. But apparently, he wasn't even aware that he was tricking the audience, because he himself thought that the horse could solve these.
So,
which is a remarkable story, right? So
it's a remarkable story, because for a horse, it's not about solving the equation, because I know that no matter how intelligent a horse is, it cannot solve a mathematical calculation. What is important about this horse is that it was picking up the cues, which was not even sent by his owner or whatever. So that is the proof of some sort of telepathy, because he was picking up what's going on in his hand.
Yes. So because we're also going to talk about animals in this episode, and I think Clever Hans was not unmasked. I think this is probably one of the clearest examples of telepathy in animals, because his caregiver or his trainer was probably thinking about the solution to the mathematical equation or whatever. And that was what the horse was picking up, right? I mean, imagine you are a horse and your eyes are on the side of the head. So, even sort of picking up the cues of your trainer, involuntarily would be next to impossible, right? And then using some kind of involuntary cue to solve a mathematical equation is ridiculous.
Yeah.
So I found this a very interesting
Yeah, I
factoid.
didn't even know about it because it's a European legend or European thing. So people who are outside Europe, they've probably never heard of it. That's why.
Yeah.
And you
So,
are very close. Where was it? Is it in Germany? You said
yeah, this was, I think, in Germany. Yeah. Yeah.
Germany. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, German philosopher and psychologist Carl Stumpf. Yeah, yeah, it's a famous story, but I never dove really into it, and I thought it was like a fraudster, but it was this probably a case of animal telepathy, like a
Hmm,
close connection with his trainer.
exactly.
So very, very interesting.
Also,
Um,
I've heard about the horses that they are very empathic. Like they with their owner, they are very loyal. You always say that dogs are loyal, but nobody talks about the loyalty of a horse. Because back in the day, I read the stories of like the wars, like before we had like modern weapons and vehicles, everybody was traveling on the horse and everything. So everybody and their horses, they have their story with their horses. Like they stayed with them in the end, even after death they stay near the dead bodies and try to protect their master. So horses are very, they humans build a connection with a horse.
True. Yeah, I mean the ancient societies had super close connections with their horse, right?
Yeah,
The riders and the warriors, and
yeah.
yeah. But talking about animals and dogs and telepathy, I want to play this one.
A chancer. Daily Mail. How JT's homing instinct came unstuck. The Independent. Pets have no sixth sense, say scientists. The Daily Telegraph. Psychic pets are exposed as a myth.
Pam Smart and I conducted 2 series of experiments with JT. The first of 100 tests was not filmed, and the second series was filmed on videotape. The videotaped experiments showed very clearly the time course of his behaviour. When Pam was not coming home, he very rarely went to the window. When she was coming home, he was there most of the time. Averages from 30 different experiments are shown in these graphs. The last 10 minutes of the graph is the first 10 minutes of her homeward journey. It's shown with a filled circle. And in every case, he's at the window most when she's on the way home. Sometimes he went to visit the window for reasons nothing to do with Pam coming home, like barking at passing cats or dogs. But we've shown all those instances in these graphs. Richard Wiseman's experiment showed essentially the same pattern as can be seen from these graphs. I pointed this out to him when we met in September 1996, but he paid no attention to what I said and never mentioned my own research, 100 videotape trials compared with 4 that he did at Pam and my invitation. The reason he was so keen to debunk this claim is that he's a committed skeptic. He believes that psychic phenomena are impossible. And because they're impossible, then people who make these claims must be either foolish or fraudulent, and there must be some flaw in the experiment.
In 2012, Richard Wiseman published a book called Paranormality, where he continues with the JT experiments and trying to debunk them, despite Rupert Sheldrake and I pointing out that his claims are completely untrue. And if there's one thing I've learnt, it's to be sceptical of the skeptics.
Yeah, and I think that is something that you just mentioned yourself. Be skeptical of the skeptics. Not always, of course. Skeptics can bring valid points or make valid points, but they can also be like dogmatic in their denial, right? I mean, I actually had a conversation with someone who was who didn't believe in UAPs, right? Like, which is fine, right? Everybody can believe whatever they want, but I really had sort of to talk to him quite a long time and show a couple of videos before he sort of was willing to change his way. But he was adamant that it was simply impossible. And then he started talking about the distances and the in space and why would they come here, etc., etc.
This is the problem with the UFA skeptics, because they are narrow-minded, because they are thinking that they are traveling in space using our science. They are not open to the ideas of spiritual transmission, hyperspace, wormholes, or like teleporting. So they, because humans cannot do it, so it means aliens cannot do it. They have to travel at under the light speed to travel. So distance means nothing. It's a human science. That's what I'm saying. Like scientists have done a big disservice to humans by creating these laws where we cannot even think outside of the box, because the universe is too big and just we cannot tap into that.
Yeah, and I
So
think one of the other things, Carl Sagan, I love Carl Sagan, but he also made the point like extraordinary claims need extraordinary evidence. I think that was a mistake by saying it that way, because
yeah,
it makes it seem like if you make a claim like extrasensory perception exists, then you have to come with extraordinary evidence. But you don't have to come with extraordinary evidence. You have to just come with evidence, right? And then people have to be open to the evidence.
yeah,
But but for a skeptic, they sort of expect that the way Carl Sagan framed it,
yeah.
that they don't have to listen regardless of what you say, right?
Yeah, for example, Mick West, the biggest critics of all, the biggest
You're a
asshole
fan.
in the world. Yeah, this man is still saying that all those New Jersey drones were fake. There were like he under Ross Coulthard tweet, he tweeted something and then he said like, yeah, New Jersey drone was a scam and they were fake. There were no drones over New Jersey. I was like, come on, man, shut the fuck up.
Yeah.
Like you can't have more extraordinary proof than that, because like it's on video, thousands of people have seen it. I have seen it in my city. To be honest, if they come right now, any night when there is no clouds,
Yeah.
I can show them that there are drones, and then there are something like orbs moving in the sky. I recently sent you a video. I was talking to a friend, and I just randomly saw that stars were moving. They were not stars. They were like, I think they were in the space. Something was moving, which looked like a star.
Yeah, and I think also people often make sort of a circular reasoning, right? So because it can't be true, it's fake, and because it's fake, it's not true, right? So it's sort of like they just
No, it's not that claim. The claim is because I cannot understand it, that's why it's not true.
yeah.
That's their thinking.
But anyway, so they just don't open their minds. They're not willing to
Yeah.
open their minds and consider the evidence. And I think the whole point with UAPs, it doesn't matter if it makes sense or not, right? I mean, at first it doesn't make any sense, but if you are not even willing to look at the evidence,
Yeah.
what are we even talking about, right? You're closing your eyes for the evidence before even seeing it, because you're saying it's impossible, right?
Yeah.
So first you have to look at the evidence, and then you come up with theories and conjectures. But I think another thing that often also happen is, the way the issue has been framed is that it has to be extraterrestrials, right? So the first thing that people say when they are hearing the word UAP or extrasensory, in this case UAP, is they're coming from another galaxy. But we don't even know if that's the case, right? They can be coming from here or from another dimension, or
Or our oceans, because what
yeah,
we don't
yeah,
know anything about our oceans.
yeah, yeah.
Or or that story from Antarctica, like Admiral Byrd story, that there are something living, like it's a story, but anyway. And then there is like a hollow earth theory, that there is like a civilization living under earth. So there are
But
so many possibilities.
the person who started this all is, of course, Jake Barber,
Yeah.
and that's why it took so long before we got to the telepathy tapes. So let's talk a little bit about what Jake Barber said.
What are psionic assets?
When we look at collecting data, one of the areas that we look to collect data is through a psionic asset, which is an individual who's trained in remote viewing, psychic abilities, telekinesis, that type of thing, which is basically through a number of different protocols can transition into a place where they are highly sensitive to their environment from the point of view of consciousness, through a consciousness field. And that is not a woo-woo topic. I know I'm just throwing it in, but it's so matter of fact to me that it's the same as saying night vision goggles. Like, it's there, we use it. And it's worked both on it's used both on the summoning side and the data collection side.
So you're saying humans summon these UAPs?
Humans. There are two types of summoning that can be done that we've proven works and we're still working with. There's machine-based summoning systems and there's man-based summoning systems. Machine-based summoning systems are, without going into details, are signals and energy systems that can be turned on or activated that summon UAP activity, or that UAP are attracted to. And I say, again, remembering what UAP means, it's a very broad term. It's unidentified anomalous phenomenon. So unidentified anomalous shit shows up. That's a pretty broad category. Now, in order to be effective at serving as a PA, you could think of consciousness as a field. Don't think of it as this superficial woo-woo thing. Like, it's literally like the World Wide Web. It's like the internet. It's always there. We can't see it. It's full of information and exciting things, but point to it. I don't see it here.
Yep.
Right? So where is it? You have to be able to tap into it. You need something like a Wi-Fi signal to get there. So individuals that have this gift are people that have been trained and have the talent to serve as a Wi-Fi to tap into the consciousness field where everything in the universe seems to exist or have its presence. And once you can do that, now you're in an environment where, while we're having other multiple forms of sense data in place, if a UAP shows up, is it registering in the consciousness field that our PA asset is connected to through the Wi-Fi? And the Wi-Fi is this process of getting into mindful meditation. So two things are happening in that process or protocol of serving as a PA. Lowering intellect, increasing intuition, and then reintroducing intellect at a higher level as an observer, not as a driver. How do you do that? Well, you're either born with a gift or you spend 30 years as a Shaolin monk and you figure out how to do it the hard way. There are either easier ways, there are cheats, and some of the cheats that have been experimented with are things that have not fared well for those involved in the program, including children, and I'll talk about them. So how do we heighten intuition? Well, you do it through stress inoculation. You do it through triggering flight or fight or flight biology systems in our body. So one of the most powerful things you can do is trigger that on. Like, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, don't reinvent the wheel. The human mind and body is already something so spectacular we don't understand it. I don't know why it works, but if you can trigger flight or fight, all these things get activated, and intuition does. So stress inoculation is one. You got to hijack the amygdala and boom, you put someone there. You need to do that to heighten intuition while subduing intellect. How do you do that? You subdue the intellect by disassociation. So there are chemical ways to induce disassociation. There are more proactive ways that you could do yourself, like through meditation. But all in all, those are the two things you do to get into that state. Well, kids are naturally way more visceral in both of those things. They're naturally more intuitive. Their intellect is lower. There is one more thing that you have to do to even enter that, and that deals with the other eye, instinct. So your instinct.
So that is a really nice interview, by the way, with Jesse Michels. Yeah. If you aren't subscribed to his channel, please do. I'll always link all the stuff down below. But Jesse Michels interviews really good guests and does a really great job in breaking things down and asks really pertinent questions. And this interview with Jake Barber is, I think, even better than the one that Ross Coulthard did.
Yes, actually, I agree.
Yeah, because he goes in way more detail.
But
But you
Actually,
can watch them next to each other because they do
also it's
complement
not
each other.
fair to compare those because Ross Coulthard was introducing the guy, and
True.
while Jesse Michael was doing the interview, he already had the basic information. So they are two separate things.
Well, yeah, true. But it did seem while I was watching it that Jesse didn't really watch the full interview with Ross because some of the things that he sort of asked and was surprised about were already sort of answered in that
Yo,
interview.
no, I'm not talking about even about the interview. I'm just talking about Ross was trying to show the world that this guy is legit.
Yeah,
While
yeah,
and Jesse was doing that, he was not trying to do that because it was already established that Jake Barber is legit. So now he was asking. So they are two separate kind of interviews. Anyway, coming back to the content of the interview, this the theory, like he said, like fight and flight thing.
Mhm.
I 100% agree with that because when I was on my psychedelic trip, that changed my life. People don't understand. I was an skeptic. I was an atheist before my psychedelic trip. That changed everything for me. So that's why I speak against the critics because they fooled me to be an atheist. Anyway, so when that trip happened, I took a huge amount. Nobody should take that kind of amount of mushrooms. Anyway, at that time, there was only two options: fight or flight. I tried to flight, I couldn't because there was no way out. So I can't run away. So the only way was I to fight, and I start fighting, and I came out of it alive and sane, and that changed everything. So I think that fight and flight can activate something in your brain that make you open to other ideas
Yeah,
outside the universe we see.
yeah, and his point was, of course, that it lowers your intellect because you have to react
Yeah,
primarily, like
yeah,
instinctively,
yeah.
uh, directly, unfiltered.
It's instincts and unfiltered. It's
Yeah,
exactly, yeah,
yeah,
uh, what is important. Secondly, mushrooms or like any psychedelic thing is also a cheat because he was talking about there are cheat ways. Psychedelic drugs are cheats. One of
yeah.
the cheats which can activate something, not for everyone because it can ruin some people's life. So I will never recommend it. But it is if you are strong mentally, then you can handle it, and do not go all in. Don't be a stupid man. So
Yeah, and at the start of this conversation with Jesse Michels, he also talks about how he got involved, and we already mentioned last time the Gate Institute, or the Gate program, I should say, that sort of very early on in the in after World War II, basically, they started apparently the Gate program where they looked for young children with high potential like Jake Barber, to get enrolled in this project, and there they trained these children or selected them, and tested their potentials, and that's a very interesting story that he tells there. And then he sort of later on gets into these sort of deeper programs where he sort of becomes a special asset to. I'm not sure. He never mentioned the groups that he worked with, but there they tested him by letting him do an IQ test normally, and then
yeah,
I think he scored like 136 or something, very high. But then he had to do the same test again, but without oxygen. So they they basically
what do you mean by without oxygen? Like they have to.
he had to put a mask on, and there was like no oxygen, and then
Oh,
he had to do the IQ test again, and then you get this sort of fight or flight reaction, right? Because you're sort of suffocating basically while you have to do the test.
yeah,
And then he scored 160 or 150, something like that, and that's where his idea came from comfort in chaos. That your heightened perception, that your perceptions are heightened while you're under a lot of stress, right? That you're actually becoming more clear-eyed uh, during stressful situations. And apparently, that's also what they do with kids in some of these programs.
yeah.
And And that's also something that we're going to talk a little bit about next time, because Michael Herrera, who's also sort of connected to Jake Barber, he recently did the interview on Sean Ryan, and that's a very interesting interview, which is also about kids and psionics and perhaps human trafficking, but that's a different story.
Yeah, also, it's just a normal thing. I think everyone have observed it. When they're hungry and they have to finish a job, they do very efficiently try to finish the job, because I think at that time the hunger is giving them fight and flight thing. So they need to finish this, so their efficiency improves so much. It's for everybody.
So, but the
Well,
question,
everybody I know.
but one of the questions, or one of the criticisms by people is but there are no other studies, right? There's nothing that proves telepathy. Well, you and me know that's nonsense, because all the Voya requests since the past 20 years revealed that Project Stargate is a reality, and that there's many other projects like it, and that remote viewing is a real thing.
Yes.
And so there are actually a ton of other studies that.
So what they mean, there are no private studies, and why we don't have private studies, because of these scientists who are trying to bullshit people that things don't exist, so there is no point of investigating it. But in terms of government is full of that. CIA, if you go and look, CIA, they were into psychic phenomena for a very long time, and it's not even a secret anymore. You can say that it didn't work. That's the best you can say, because what you cannot deny, that CIA was involved. CIA was involved for decades with this thing, and I think they are still doing that.
Yeah, and you can imagine that if it does work, that you have gatekeepers at universities that try to stop these things from being tested, right? Because that's the last thing that they want, to get it out in the open.
Also, I think that's one of the reasons that government want to control this whole phenomena. That's why they don't allow private sector, and that's why they ask scientists to do this propaganda, so no private industry goes in that thing, and government have the monopoly, or CIA have the monopoly on this psychic phenomena.
Amen.
And it lasted 21 years, so that they're getting something of value. I would say, generally speaking, the people who brought stuff to us were absolutely, thoroughly agreed with what we were doing.
Here are the 19 agencies. That's the Army, there's the CIA, the Drug Enforcement Agency, there's the DIA, FBI, and so on, right? And the numbers on top of these bar graphs are the number of times independent chimes with different new missions that each of these places came back with new missions. And the all-time record here is 172 separate missions. A joint task force, after the Cold War was over, was set up here in the San Francisco Bay Area called Alameda. Their mission was to interdict contraband drugs coming in by the sea. So they would task us and the people at Fort Meade saying, okay, hey, 2 weeks from today, precognition, where can we board this boat in U.S. territorial waters? They came back 172 separate missions. They loved us. We were damn good at that job.
And this was are these missions all declassified at this point, or?
Almost none of them are.
Yeah, almost none of them are. So and that's of course why there's no evidence.
Well, technically there is, because CIA said that they use these people, and then Joe McMoneagle and I forgot the name of the other guy who was like the bearded guy. So they both also were on Sean. Yeah, they both were on Sean Ryan, and they are like very detailed shows. And especially the Joe McMoneagle one, he has explained everything, and then it says verified that Joe McMoneagle did that for CIA. So I think we have enough evidence. Yeah, we don't have enough evidence to prove every mission, and I don't think we will even have that, because that will bring this secrecy and the national security. So that's not the point. The point is they were involved in that, and they were getting missions, and it was working.
Absolutely. And this guy that you saw is Edward May, I think. He was the last director of the Stargate for 10 years or 20 years, something along those lines.
Yeah.
He has done a lot of very interesting interviews. And he also was on Sean Ryan. And I want to play a very Edwin Seamay.
Edwin Seamay. Yeah, that's what I forgot the name of the guy, but that's important.
So in this short segment, he sort of explains how sort of these ESP powers, who. Now, let's just hear.
In other words, we have a testable hypothesis of how this might work. Now, I don't know if you've heard the term synesthesia.
I have not.
Synesthesia, it's well known, about 4% of the population experience it. People who have synesthesia, called synesthetes, they see numbers and color. They experience music viscerally in their stomach rather than listening through their ears. It's sort of like crosstalk about various parts of the sensory systems in the brain, and that's been confirmed with a functional MRI and so on. So for all of our participants, including Joe and Angela, and they all have synesthesia, all of them. And that is a huge clue about what's going on. And what that means is in the white matter of the brain, there's a lot of communication going back and forth across the brain. And we posit, needs to be shown if it's true or not, that someone who is really psychic, like Joe, will have much more hyperconnectivity inside the white matter of his brain than the average person will. If that's true, we're home free. So we're working toward.
Yeah, so synesthetes or synesthesia is like, where the senses are basically mixed up, where you can hear sound, see sound and hear colors and, all that kind of stuff, what he just said. And they're also often connected to savants. And of course, the autistic children in the videos with these psychic abilities, they are basically also savants. So that's very interesting. Diana, the neuropsychologist from the Telepathy Tapes, she also postulates that because the children have difficulty speaking, because they all have this sort of speech impairment or communication impairment, that consciousness wants to naturally express itself, that it finds these latent abilities within us in order to find any means in order to express itself. So that's her theory, that these savants have heightened ESP abilities because of their speech impairment and consciousness drive to express itself. But maybe they also have forms of synesthesia, because another famous autistic person who's pretty famous is called Daniel Tammet. I'm not sure if you know Daniel Tammet.
No, I don't.
He was a Brit, or he's still a Brit. And he was able to, I'll just read it. Daniel Tammet set the European record for pi memorization last year. It's a couple of years ago now. Memorizing 22,514 digits of pi in just over 5 hours. He attributed the feat to his ability to see numbers as complex three-dimensional landscapes, complete with color, texture, and sometimes even sound that he would walk through in his mind. But he could also learn languages in a few days, like different language. I think he can speak 27 different languages or something. And he also developed sort of a system that allows people who have difficulty learning new languages to learn it in a very intuitive, adaptive way that makes it much more easier to learn different languages. And he sort of designed that himself based on his own experiences. And another thing that Daniel Tammet also has, when you sort of read his book, Born on a Blue Day, he was actually born on the same day as me, January 17th. But that he also had epileptic seizures, and epileptic seizures are also sort of connected to UAPs, as we saw in some of these other videos that we saw previously, I think 2 shows ago. So there, I think synesthesia is part of it. I think sort of this consciousness that wants to express itself any which way it can. And perhaps also sort of epileptic seizures where you sort of get contacted, or not always, of course, but perhaps there's also a level of contact there with, something else. But I have this clip here because I want to showcase Daniel Tammet a little bit. Okay, it's pretty mind-boggling.
The circumference of a circle divided by its diameter. It's a number with no pattern, but seems to be infinite. Daniel reckoned he could reel off the first 22,500 decimal places without a mistake.
1 4 1 5 9 2 6 5 3 5 8 2 0 9 7 4 9 4 4 2 3 6 4 8 0 8 8 1 0 9 2 5 9 0 3 4 6 9 0.
It's insane. I think it's harder to sort of check what he's saying than even
Exactly, but how is he doing that? Like,
yeah, he's literally walking in his mind through a landscape of numbers. So for this person, pi is a landscape, like a place that he visits in his head.
Oh,
And
okay.
yeah, so he doesn't have to he's not really memorizing it. It's just a landscape, like
So
it's like,
yeah, he cannot calculate that because
no, he's just telling you what he sees as he walks around.
My God,
So and that's pi, right? So but there was also another story of a synesthetic, and that person was a cook, and that he was like a 4-star Michelin cook, and I've been trying to locate that story because it's been a while since I was into this stuff, but I haven't been able to retrieve it yet. But anyway, the story goes something like this: that this person was able to manipulate 3D objects in front of him. So like he could see sort of shapes in front of him, and then they could sort of manipulate the shape. And out of that shape that he then sculpted in the air, he created like the perfect meal, which was like the physical representation of the Platonic shape that he created. And he was like a 4-star Michelin, and people said like, I don't know how he does it, but those ingredients and the way he mixes them are perfect. But that was also a synesthetic cook that actually saw 3D shapes in front of him that he used to cook by, as sort of like a cooking book, or whatever. It's a bizarre story.
Yeah,
but apparently true.
Yeah, and again, all these stories, and I don't know, there are 1,000 more stories like that which never see the daylight because of scientists closing our mind. We
True.
need to wake up, because that was a big disservice scientists have done, especially atheist scientists. There are like good scientists who are open to ideas. Like there are scientists who are believers, but then this whole strain of scientists like Richard Dawkins, even what's his name, New York guy, hidden people, Neil deGrasse Tyson, that guy. These guys are on the TV guiding the civilization, and they are actually doing this service.
Yeah, and I think also like schizophrenics are interesting in the sense that they have a lack of a filter, right? They see stuff that shouldn't be there, and synesthetic.
They went too far because they are too far in that dimension that they cannot even come back here. That's the problem with schizophrenic. Yeah. So I think what we need to find is the right balance where you can be in the middle. But if you went too far, then even if you are trying to communicate something, you are not able to, because we don't understand what they are saying. It's like it looks like you are crazy.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And the point is, of course, I think we also talked about it. Like, what is normal? Like, normal is just that you're crazy together, right? But because we're all crazy in the same way, it looks normal, right? It's like a normal distribution, and the outliers are crazy because they're not normal, right? And I think when you sort of take psychedelics, or if you have like a mental breakdown, or you become become a schizophrenic, or you're a synesthetic, right? Your brain gets like a different wiring, and you might actually perceive different types of reality, or different modalities of reality, I should say, like looking at a reality in a different way. While it's still there, it's actually the same reality, only you're looking at it from a different angle because your filter is scrambled or changed or lifted, right? So our brains are trying to make sense of sensory stimuli, but they are sort of translating that into what we call normality or reality. But if you sort of tweak it or change it slightly, our reality will still be our reality, but the results or the end product might be something completely different. Or
Yeah. So we need to, like, first of all, we need to create a proper SOPs for doing this stuff. The problem is nobody is doing any research for years. Now they have started doing it. So first we need to actually define this space. There is like this is space where we are in, and then there is another space. How to go in there and come back successfully? Because a lot of the time, sometimes you go there, you come back fine, which happen in most cases, like with psychedelic thing. But sometimes you go there, you're unable to come back, and then you go back again, and then you lose some of your mind over there. So what happened is, like, the more you visit those places, the more schizophrenic you get. And then when we are talking about crazy, yes, most of the people with better understanding of the world are crazy, but uh, there is a point where you are not even, like, no, like with normal crazy people, when they talk something, you still understand them, but you don't believe them. But then there is a point you reach, I'm talking about schizophrenia, that we are not even able to understand what they're.
yeah,
So
yeah,
at that point, yeah, you don't want to be that guy, like act
no,
like a vegetable. So we need to make sure that we are going to chart the places. Like we need to psycho cartographer. I don't know, psycho
yeah,
cartographer is a
yeah, yeah,
psychic cartographer who can
yeah.
go to the uncharted land and make a map of it.
Actually, in the surrealist school, there was a thing like cartography, right? There was actually a thing for some surrealist
Yeah,
artists. Yeah,
it's a dangerous game, but somebody need to do it.
yeah, yeah. Well, but going back to reality, there's apparently a latent ability in all of us, and some people have a natural aptitude and they're very skillful and they don't need a lot of training, and other people have like a more basic skill set, and they, with some training, then they can reach quite a high level or a decent level, and some people like just suck at it, of course. But there are a lot of different things that people have, and actually, when you sort of become aware of it, people are actually aware of it, but they're not really aware of it. Take, for example, when somebody calls, and then in advance who it is who calls, right? And then people say, "Oh, that's that's a coincidence. I was just thinking of you."
Yeah.
Well, Rupert Sheldrake, who we just saw, he did a lot of these kind of studies, and this is some of
This
the
is
results.
actually in Telepathy Tapes as well, that you
Yeah.
think about something and then they call.
Yeah.
And a lot of
Rupert
people,
he's actually mentioned in the Telepathy Tapes.
yeah. Also, I have experienced that as well.
Yeah,
Anyway,
me too.
That's one reason. I think our minds are extended through attention, even in every act of perception. And I think our intentions reach out and affect others too, which is why if you think about somebody and you want to call them up on the phone, they may pick up your intention and start thinking about you. Mm-hmm. And so when you ring, they say, "That's funny, I was just thinking about you." Mm. And this is a very common experience. More than 80% of people have had it. And I've done lots of experiments to see, is it just coincidence? And in my tests, we have 4 callers. We select one caller at random. The subject has to guess which of those 4 people is calling, 25% chance of being right by just guessing. And in our filmed experiments, we film the subject to make sure there's no cheating. And it turns out they're right about 50% of the time. Not all the time, but it's way beyond what they ought to be. So I think the evidence for the extended mind is very strong through telepathy and through the sense of being stared at.
Yeah, and then, let's just jump into the second one, the sense of being stared at. I think you and me, probably everybody has had this experience, that you think that somebody's looking at you and you turn around and then, somebody's looking at you. I've had that a couple of times in my life, and I imagine you have had to have it.
Actually, more than a few times.
Okay, let's listen to this.
Experiments have already been done on the sense of being stared at. They've been done in at least 37 different schools and colleges. They've been replicated in many parts of the world. The statistical significance is astronomical. At the Nemo Science Museum in Amsterdam, an experiment on the sense of being stared at was running for more than 20 years. More than 20,000 people took part. It was called Have You Got Eyes in the Back of Your Head? And people had to guess whether they were being looked at or not in a randomized sequence of trials. The results were astronomically significant statistically. I mean, I didn't run this experiment myself. It was run by the Dutch Museum. The results were analyzed by Dutch statisticians, and it showed a massively significant effect. The most sensitive subjects, incidentally, were children under the age of 9. So here we...
Yeah, so children again. So apparently, and then that's something we also talked about last time with Jake Barber. So Jake Barber mentioned like there's 3 types of people, and there's probably more, but 3 types that really stand out as having psychic abilities are women, left-handed gay men, and children. And children, they are sort of recurring thing, and that has to do with the intuition, high levels of intuition, low levels of intellect, but also being, and that have, it also has to do with the definitions, right? What do you exactly mean with intuition? But basically, they are alive. They're really alive. They have this sort of magical perception of life. They still believe in magic often. They are good at visualization. They are so they're just like really there, right? Before our science and our society sort of teaches them that magic doesn't exist and magical thoughts don't have any effects, and that only materialism, reductionist materialism, is real and of any significance, and that you have to behave and listen and follow orders and be a good kid, right?
By the way, I'll tell you, 80% of the world population believe in magic. It's just what we see on TV is something else, because they are trying to take the narrative and put it on the people. But majority of the people, especially in Asia, I've never met a single person who doesn't believe in magic. Everybody, especially in South Asia side, because they are very magical. There are a lot of magical stories. Everybody knows that it is true, but the knowledge has been lost. The magic was real. Also, like, if you believe in religion, especially if you're talking about Christianity, like monotheistic, even the polytheistic religion, all of them have magical things. In fact, in dark magic is a real form of, like, even the prophets were attacked by dark magic. So magic exists. Like, if you believe in religion, you believe in magic. That's why I'm saying 80% of the world population believe in magic.
Yeah, and you could even say, as some religious scholars have argued, is like monotheistic religions are actually latecomers to the party, and that was sort of the first step towards enlightenment, so to speak, because by centralizing religions in a sort of monotheistic framework, it sort of got reduced and got rid of a lot of the more extreme magical thinking. And then, the next step was, of course, philosophy, and then science, and then,
Yeah, but monotheistic religion, yes, they are anti-religion or anti-magic because they think the magic is a
the
teaching
devil.
from the Satan, basically.
Yeah.
But they do not deny it, that they know that it
True.
exists and
Yeah,
tell them
it's still
they
in
are
the
two separate
framework.
things.
Yeah.
Yeah, they tell that it's true and do
Yeah.
not engage with it.
Yeah,
But
they
they only
keep it
talk
to the
about dark
periphery.
magic. Yeah,
Yeah.
but they also talk about only dark magic, not all form of magic. Because I have studied
Yeah.
that there are some form of magic, even prophets, especially the time of the Solomon, King Solomon, there was a lot of magic going on. There was bad magic and there was good magic. Solomon was using good magic to fight the dark magic forces, or like the forces of darkness, and they were
But-
using dark magic.
But also in the last one, I think it was 2 shows ago with Daniel Sheehan. We're actually going to play another 2 clips from that one. But Daniel Sheehan also mentioned, like with most religions, and especially with the monotheistic religions, it's actually you got like one founding father, for example, Muhammad or Jesus or the Buddha. Okay, Buddhism is not really a monotheistic religion, but and they are allowed to have these special abilities, and the rest
No,
don't have
that's
them, right?
because I know about that, and he was wrong about monotheistic religion. This is not how it. First of all, there are no founders. They are like the mess. Like if we are talking about Islam, Muhammad is not the founder of the religion. He was like the last prophet. So religion actually ended with him. So
Yeah, I
there
know.
were like different prophets. So it's not like about that. And also, it's not only prophets who can use it. Prophet can only do the miracles, but magic was allowed, like the knowledge was allowed for everyone. Actually, he wanted people to learn that, and he gave some quotes of Solomon. At the time of that, the people were so advanced that they could move the throne of princess of Sheba in a second. So there are like a lot of the thing, and they were not prophets. They were just normal humans who have high knowledge. So it's not even allowed. I think that Daniel Chinese was wrong in that you are not allowed to do it. You are allowed to do it, but you have to be very careful not to tackle with the dark forces. You have to go
Yeah,
in with the good forces.
true. But I mean, it is sanctioned, right? I mean, the amount of saints and people who have sort of these abilities is very limited. They try to keep it as limited and as exclusive as possible. In most cases, not always. Like I
Not
know.
always, but also the people were stupid. Most of the people back in the day didn't even know how to write it. So it wasn't the fault of the saints, it was the fault of the people. They were not educated. So first thing they wanted to do, actually all religion, that go and learn. That's why the book came in. It's very easy for us to understand, like, oh, the God gave us the Bible, for example, right? But back in the day when no one can read it, God is telling you to read it. So God is giving you something. There were no books at that time. People don't understand. It's not like today. Back in the day, there were like very few books. It
Few
was
books.
only holy books at that time. So
And
it's about teaching. It's about teaching. God was trying to teach you, but he was trying to differentiate that there are dark magic and there are good magic. Even with the science, there are good sciences and then there are bad sciences. There are good scientists who can create cures of the diseases, and then there are bad sciences where you can create a virus and kill half of the world population. So it is a balance. It's just we don't understand the balance.
So let's take a look at the most extreme cases. What could you do with if you're very talented, you have a high aptitude, and you have trained? What are some of the crazy stuff that you can do with these powers? Let's listen to 2 of these stories.
That Pat Price had actually evolved to the point where they could take a full photograph of a boomer-class Russian submarine, nuclear submarine, and show it to him and say, where is it? Right now. And he would give him right down to the exact longitude and latitude, down to the minute and second of exactly where that is. And he visualized the whole thing and told him exactly where it was. But there was a huge UFO right over the top of the water where that thing was. And it was tracking it and monitoring it. And he had it in the file, I'm going, whoa! I said, this is pretty wild. And then I said, okay, so what else have you got? He says, well, here. And I said, show me the second file. And he showed me the second file. And it was, again, from Ingo Swann. It was a deep inside report from Ingo Swann that they had taken Pat Price in the program up to southern Canada, south central Canada, just north of the state of Michigan. And he brought him to this little facility. It was like this little domed little building. And it had these big, huge dishes on top, these communication dishes on top. And they brought him in, and they set him down, and they put this helmet on him, and they had him think a particular message. And they turned all the big antenna down to the northern peninsula of Michigan, that little section that's in there, and had him be telepathically projecting, when it comes time for you to file your national, your U.S. income tax forms next year, file them in this little post office box down in this little town down in West Virginia. And 85% of the people did it next year.
No way.
So yeah, Pat Price, of course, died and then went undercover, as we heard from what was his name again? Atkinson. I forgot his
Yeah,
first name.
yeah. It's a cool story, but
Yeah.
Pat Price is the one who took this remote viewing to the next level, and then he's cut out Joe McMoneagle and the original Stargate guys and created a secret CIA program or
Yeah.
secret Pentagon program, whatever. But this
Yeah.
is the theory, conspiracy theory.
I think Pat Price was perhaps the best of those. You got Ingo Swann is very famous, and you got Joe McMoneagle, of course, very famous.
Yeah.
But I suspect that Pat Price was probably the best of those three. Also, these kind of stories. I mean, that it's almost hard to believe that they're real because they're so outlandish. But so what's very interesting in the first story, that when he sort of looked at the picture of the submarine, that he, first of all, he located it, of course, he knew exactly where it was. But what was the thing that Sheehan mentioned was that at the moment that they sort of located the submarines, a UFO appeared above the submarine. So and we now know from these psionic assets that they can control and steer UAPs with their mind, right? That's what they do. They summon the UAPs, and then you can actually control the UAP with your thoughts. And that's how they land sometimes, or crash them, or get them somewhere and then shoot them with electromagnetic weapon systems. But apparently you can also use them to scout, because from the story, I mean, that was the implication that Sheehan was drawing, was that that Pat Price was using the UAP perhaps to scout through remote viewing. Perhaps there's always a UAP involved with remote viewing.
Yeah.
To scout the submarine,
Yeah.
which was then there as told in the story.
Yeah, Pat Price was really good, but he was not only good with his. I don't know if he was better than Ingo Swann or Joe McMoneagle, but he was smarter than them, because he convinced CIA to do a covert program and cut out what is public, and then started the whole secret program thing. So he was really good. And to be honest, the story of Joe McMoneagle, I think, interests me the most, because he saw something which is amazing, the Mars thing, the 1,000.
I like Joe.
Yeah.
And I have never really seen Pat Price, but these kind of stories are wild, like really wild. I mean, there's even some
but
other.
This is a very good idea that he was using UFOs to remote view. That is insane. I think this is more than remote viewing. He's doing something more than remote viewing.
Yeah, well, let's go and end with the telepathy tapes, because I actually got a couple of short clips, and we don't have too much time, so let's run through them.
All right.
So first off, this is about the skeptics. Like, how can you control for these kind of things?
By 2 numbers and see if he gets it.
Okay, what is it?
9 0 0.
Unbelievable.
And it's kind of like, okay, so nobody's holding a letter board, and even some of the experiments that I was involved in, we had set up a 2-computer synchronized test scenario where the sender, the mom usually, receives some sort of a cue, whether it's random numbers or a word or something. And then the receiver, the non-speaker, has to input their response. And of course, they're on opposite ends of a table. There's no way they can see each other's computers. And when we did that test, actually, because, the mom is on the opposite side, so she's not holding the letter board. But when we did that, the non-speaker we were working with is not particularly adept at using a keyboard. So we had somebody else hold the letter board that didn't know any of the numbers, any of the letters. They weren't seeing the cue. And so that way, this was Houston. So Houston could respond on the letter board, and then it was typed in by the person helping, but neither of them had seen any of the cues. They couldn't see the other computer. So, we do have some tests where at least that element was really controlled for. And so, it doesn't get as much attention, but, we've seen that data. We need more of that kind of data.
So, that's for the critics. There are actually tests like as best as they could do, right, under those circumstances where you sort of eliminate as many variables as possible. And, we're going to play a couple of more, and then you can sort of understand how...
Before that, I just want to say that people think that this gift is always there. No, it is activated somehow. Sometimes it does activate, sometimes it does not. So it's not like, it's not like it's there all the time. Anyway,
wait till you see all of these clips. Okay. Got some really nice highlights.
Mia do her thing for the first time. I mean, honest to God, I think my jaw about hit the floor because, it was just crazy. I think they started with like a random 3-digit number and, just no problem. She just boom, boom, boom. And just one after another.
Yeah.
That's kind of like,
that's what I was going to say is like, if it happened once, that's like, okay, maybe that could have happened. But like, if you're standing there all day and just watching her do it again and again and again, like, does that kind of just put your mind in a different place, you think, than other people that have kind of watched just the podcast or the documentary that haven't seen it firsthand?
For sure. And again, some of the skeptics or critics, they haven't seen it. And so I get it, and you just see a tiny little clip and maybe there's something in the clip that looks like, oh, I don't know, something might be going on there. But when you're in the room and you see this happening all day long, under lots of different circumstances and lots of different tests, and they pretty much don't miss, which is the crazy part, right? Because, most of the telepathy research that's been done prior to this point is, with neurotypical individuals, and, it's a forced choice kind of a setup where the sender sees an image or something, and then the receiver has 4 choices of images. And it's like, well, which one do you think it was? Right? So you've got a 25% chance of guessing right. And in that research, it's like, it generally comes out at like 30% or something, which is statistically significant. And it's interesting. So it's like, okay, people can do better than chance. But then when you're seeing people do this in an open response format, it's not forced choice. It's like, what's the word? What word am I looking at? And it's like, holy crap. Yeah. And like when I was doing the testing on the computer, like one of the words was manager. So we were doing like 3-syllable words, and, Houston was just boop, 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 just spell it out, no problem. Doing full sentences out of a book, that his mom was looking at. And so like open response like that, like just not missing anything, that's a whole different deal, right? Because it's like, clearly they're just completely tapped in.
Yeah. So
Oh yeah, that's crazy.
yes, it's next level shit.
Yeah, but what I was trying to say is not about this specific, because some people are really good. But what I was talking about, like when you're doing tests, sometimes they're gonna work, sometimes they're not gonna work. It's not like the people who don't have that ability, sometimes they are unable to activate it. So I was talking about like in the testing. Secondly, I want to say we are being attacked by bots, I guess.
Yeah, I just deleted 2 of them. You sometimes have that.
No, but
Uh,
I got like a message from the restream that uh,
yeah, no, yeah,
the feed is broken and stuff. I
I
think they didn't like what we have to say.
now you want to see another one?
Yeah.
Okay,
Let's
okay,
go
cool.
ahead. Yeah.
This one is also really cool.
Akil, like there's, Akil knows what his mom's been out doing. Like she's out running errands and he knows exactly where she's at and what she's doing. And, and then can tell her later, oh, you went to this store and you bought this and you did this. And so clearly some of them are able to tap in, at a distance.
But they
But then
can't
there's
just do
also-
it with anybody, right? Like, wasn't that same individual couldn't do it with his father? It was only with the mother?
Yeah, Mia, she can only do it with her mother. And so this is another interesting thing because like Houston can do it with just about anybody. Because, I witnessed him do it with somebody on the film crew, after we were done. The person on the film crew, I kind of felt bad for those folks, right? Because they're sitting there watching this all day and they got to kind of stay out of it. It's like, just do your job, just film.
Yeah.
And so at the end of the day, this one guy wrote a word on a piece of paper and held it to his chest and went up to Houston and said, what word do I have here? And Houston spelled it out, friend was the word, and just spelled it perfectly.
Wild.
And
Wild.
so, there are some of them seem to be able to tap into a variety of people. And so I'm curious about that too. Like, why is it that some of them seem to only be able to connect with their moms or primary caregiver? It's usually the mom. And others, it doesn't seem to matter. It could be a sibling or a friend or anybody. So it's another.
Oh, so that one was also really wild. So what you kind of see in the telepathy tapes, because they also have a paywall, right? And a lot of skeptics, and I understand that criticism, right? So I'm not going to pay for charlatans. Just give me what you have, right? Why does it have to be behind the paywall?
But
I don't like
manage
paywall either.
Yeah, but they need to. They have expenses too. I understand it. I'm not paying it. That's one thing, but I understand that they have to charge because nobody is sponsoring them. They're self-sponsoring companies, so they need to make money somehow.
Yeah, no, exactly, right. I mean, and that's also with a lot of people always say that towards anybody who makes any kind of content, like, why do you have a paywall? Otherwise I can't make a living, right?
Yeah.
We basically do Bitcoin Live for free, but sometimes you think like maybe we should also create a paywall. We're not earning anything doing this, but but so you can't really blame content creators for having paywall.
Like right now we can afford, but like eventually we have to do something. Right now I will suggest to add like your donation thing. People can voluntarily donate if they want to, rather than adding a paywall. And then later on we can think about it. But
yeah,
we just run a small show. It's our time is invested, especially yours. I was just here once in 2 weeks, but you are there all the time, managing so many shows.
Steve is mostly here all the time.
But
by the way, shout out to the organized. I forgot to do that at the beginning.
Yeah, but what I'm trying to say is like the people here, they have life, they have expenses. So it is a thing that they need paywall. So I don't blame them, and I don't like the criticism like why it's behind the paywall. No, it has to be they have spent time and money on the show.
So before we move on, I want to show this article because I sent you this article yesterday, and that's actually one of the reasons why we wanted to do the show.
Yeah.
I got this free on my brother. He sent it to me because we were talking about the telepathy tapes. It's from Mail Online. The Mail Online is not per se a really good newspaper, but it is more about the article itself. So scientists discovers all humans can read minds and how you can tap into telepathic abilities. And basically, researchers in Canada uncovered the parts of the brain actually act as a psi inhibitor, meaning it suppresses the natural psychic, telepathic, and clairvoyant abilities people have but don't know about. So a part of our brain, and I'll tell you which part that is. It's the left frontal cortex, if I'm saying that right. Suppresses sort of our innate abilities by subduing them, of course. Let's see, I'm trying to search at the same time. So anyway, what they're doing is with magnetic means, you can sort of shut down certain areas of the brain. It's always here. The filter was turned off by a process called repetitive transcranial magnetic stimulation, or RTMS, which uses a non-invasive device to send magnetic waves to specific brain regions. And then we have to go down, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, a little bit. Years. Okay, then one group received this treatment on the right medial middle frontal region, and another received a placebo treatment, which did not change their brains. Neither group saw any change in their psi abilities after RTMS therapy. However, the volunteers who received RTMS on their left medial middle frontal region saw these abilities increase noticeably. So if you turn off the left medial middle frontal region, they suddenly appear. It confirmed their suspicion. So this area that they turned off in this way, they found, of course, that that area of the lobe contributes to the executive functioning, which includes planning, making decisions, and working towards goals. So that's basically how Western society is organized, right? We plan, we make decisions, we strategize, we move towards goals. So it's sort of the executive branch of the brain, right? That has to plan and has to execute plans. It's very logical, like the left brain is very logical. It also appears to help people focus their attention, right? It's Jake Barber said when he was talking about psionics, like you have to increase your intuition. So that is like the right brain side, or the right brain is associated with intuition especially. And you have to lower these executive functions, which is the left brain, right? Or the intellect. And then the intellect has to sort of recur at the top as an observer, which is basically what you do when you meditate. Is you learn to observe without interfering, which is extremely hard, right? Because the ego sort of keeps getting itself involved in wanting and in doing, but it shouldn't do anything. It should just only observe. So anyway, that's very interesting. But that's also what they found in the telepathy tapes. Look, this is what they found, because this guy that you hear talking, he's actually doing the neuro scanning. So he's also a scientist.
Was, a decrease of fast brain waves in the frontal lobe. So kind of not a big surprise there. That kind of makes some sense. And it was particularly leaning over to the right frontal lobe, which again is pretty consistent with some things I've seen with other psychic abilities, and not even just with, folks who have an autism diagnosis, right? Is this sort of change of activity in the right frontal lobe. So he showed that. He also showed an increase of his brain pattern was really interesting.
Is he right-handed?
Yes.
I was thinking, because like left is, left brain for right-handed people is more analytical, right? And I think the right side is more
Need a high-quality AI voice like this for your content? Just
No.
Present moment, big idea, and apparently extrasensory perception.
Yeah, and we see a lot of this right and left brain differentiation with other things as well. With psychics and mediums, it shows up a lot. With Houston, it was like almost like drawing a line down the middle of the brain and seeing this different response, because he actually showed an increase of theta activity only in the right hemisphere. Like, I mean, there was no, like, the left side just looked completely the same as it did before. But the right side, all of a sudden, there's this giant burst of, actually, it was 7 and 8 hertz, very specifically. Which is interesting too, because that's kind of right there in that Schumann resonance frequency. So that was in the right
What's that,
hemisphere.
Jeff? I'm not that familiar with that.
Yeah, so the Schumann resonance it's the energy, the electromagnetic field that exists between the ionosphere and the Earth. And it's created predominantly by lightning strikes on the planet. And so it creates this electromagnetic field that we all live in, right? Because it's what's around us on planet Earth. And the dominant frequency is 7.83 hertz. And, it was...
So it's basically exactly the same thing as the Canadians found, or these Canadian researchers found. So we're moving into a very exciting new age where and it's actually, I actually got 3 more clips. Do you think we can run through them, or is that too much?
Maybe we'll do it next week or next time.
Okay, yeah, it's probably
because I think because there's another show.
No, we can go overtime. We are the last show, so we can run them quickly.
Oh. Okay, sure.
Okay,
Go ahead. Let me grab the coffee. Just start playing. I'm listening.
Okay, here we go. Another one. By the way, this interview is really good. Go watch it. I'll link it down below. It's full of interesting stuff.
And what some of the non-speakers talk about is that, telepathy is just way more efficient. Like, it's a lot of work for them to have to communicate using words. And, many of them can get themselves to do it, but it's a lot of work. Like, telepathy is just way simpler, right, for them. And to me, it makes sense that, the idea that when we're using language, really what we're doing is we are taking information from the environment and putting some sort of label on it, right? We're trying to sort of make everything concrete and easy to understand and in some sort of structured way. And, when we do that, of course, we've actually changed the nature of what the experience was. As soon as we put words on something, we've actually changed it. And so it's no longer the pure essence of what it was. And so for me, it makes me wonder if maybe because they live most of the time in this other space where they're not engaged with language the way we think of it, that, they're just more tapped into the purity of what exists out there. They're not as limited. And I think that makes a lot of sense because, a lot of the brain is oriented toward inhibiting things.
Right. Filter out the massive amount of data that's coming in so we can make sense of this crazy world.
Exactly. Right. All the brain cares about is like, well, what do I need to pay attention to survive? Right. Like what is immediately relevant to my physical existence. And so, it filters out everything else. And, so for many of these folks, if those barriers aren't there, they don't have that inhibition, which also makes sense of why sometimes they appear to be so sensitive to the environment, right? If you can't filter out everything, then it's going to be overwhelming to have all of the lights and sounds and noises and thoughts. And many of these kids talk about that, if they're around too many people, it's like there's too much internal noise because they're picking up the information from everybody else in the room. And so it's just a noise.
So that I find that very interesting because it gives an insight into sort of what it must be like to have disability.
Yeah. Also, this conversation I just thought of something. In Bible there is a mention that all humans used to speak one language, and then God make them forget that, and now we are divided into different languages. What if that language, the universal language, was a telepathic language, and God took that ability out, and then we are left with words? So maybe that's what God was talking about, and we just misinterpreted it into one common
No.
language, because we all still I think that was the telepathic ability which can be taken away from you, not the language.
I think you're absolutely right, and I think because language also divides, right? I mean, like
Yeah.
what he's explaining in this video is actually that. I mean, that's also what Jacques Derrida was talking about. That language always comes between us and the thing that we're describing, right? It's always there in between us and reality or perception, or we can never get a sort of direct access to something. But if we had like a telepathic communication, like before language, then there was also no division between people. Like quite literally, we would be like really intimately connected on a much deeper level than language can ever give us.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it makes sense to take away the ability to punish humans, not just changing the language, because that doesn't make any sense. It never made any sense until this whole conversation we are having with telepathy.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I got two more. I kind of got which one
Let's
this one. I think this is also about the brain.
So Mia. So it was interesting because her brain. So she did show an increase of theta activity, but it was frontal. So it was kind of across the whole frontal lobe. It wasn't specific to the right hemisphere, which again makes some sense. Kind of disinhibiting the frontal lobe. But instead of showing a decrease of activity in the right frontal lobe like Houston did, she actually showed an increase of activity in the right frontal lobe. And again, so I've seen this a lot with psychics and mediums where the regions of the brain show up consistently. Right frontal lobe is one of them that show up as something is changing there. But what's interesting is that not everybody changes it the same way. Some people increase energy there. Some people decrease energy there. For some people, it's all of the brain waves. For other people, it's very specific brain waves. But that right frontal lobe shows up over and over again.
Yeah, in this book, you talked about how.
Yeah. No, that latter part's not so interesting, but and it also ties into the work from Ian McGilchrist. I mean, I've mentioned him many times, like the master and the emissary, and the master is the right brain or the right hemisphere, and the emissary who sort of takes over from the master and suppresses or subdues the master is the left hemisphere brain, the executive functioning, who's geared towards manipulation and grabbing and getting hold of things and dividing things and making analysis, and it's a very analytical way of thinking and looking, and while the right brain is way more holistic, like in its approach, it looks at everything, how are things connected, like the in-betweenness, and how things are like one instead of separate things, and how it looks continuously towards opportunities and dangers, and while the left brain is only focused on what it knows, not what it ignores what it doesn't know, because it doesn't exist for the left brain. So and that's and in our current society we are sort of conditioned or and trained in order to only focus on stuff that we know, like, and what we don't know is not important, because otherwise we would know it, right? So we can sort of ignore everything that is, we can ignore all the noise, right? And these children, they have no filter basically, so there is no separation between signal and noise, right? There is only sort of everything is there, right, to tap into. So the final clip. Let's go.
But really what I'm interested in at the moment is like, what is the overlap with what we're seeing with them and then what we see with other psychics and mediums that are neurotypical? Yeah. And there is a fair amount of overlap, which is kind of interesting. And so, I feel like we're getting closer and closer. I mean, we've already been doing some experimentation with things like audiovisual entrainment and, low power transcranial magnetic stimulation and things like that, which actually seem to have been pretty effective, at least in certain circumstances. So I feel like we're getting closer to figuring out how to help people nudge their brain into a more receptive state.
Yeah, there's no telling where this is going to go, and there's a lot of reports and even whistleblowers coming out of the government and private contractors.
Yeah, we know. So I think that was the last clip. So that was more about sort of the implementation of these new insights and the technologies to sort of enhance people's abilities by shutting down that left brain that sort of keeps interfering and suppressing these innate abilities, and actually sort of to enhance them. You could even enhance them, and maybe that's also what Neuralink is about, and and what's at stake, right, in this world, this brave new world that we're moving into, where maybe they're looking at people as psionic assets, as potential psionic assets, to harvest and control and read out. But so I think especially this interview, after I saw this interview with this guy who's doing the neuroimaging, and he's a scientist himself, that really sort of blew my mind. And
No, this is a very interesting interview. People should go and watch the whole thing. We just played some clips, and it is really thought-provoking thing. And it's not just he's talking out of nowhere. He have done experiments. He have videos of those experiments. You can go and see that and see what's going on. And it's not like a dumb experiment. It's like it's an experiment with every proof you need to see. And you can try to replicate it if you can find the right variables.
And then we'll link down everything below. I mean, also the interviews with Joe McMonagle are super good, and the stuff from Rupert Sheldrake, the stuff that they did with animals, the test. There's also a book, by the way. What's the title of the book? Dogs Know When You Come Home, something along those lines. It's a really good book.
Also, I'll recommend that Joe McMonagle interview with Sean Ryan. That literally changed my view, because that when we started, I wasn't a believer of remote viewing. That everybody knows that, because I was very vocal about that. But then I saw that interview, and then it just clicked something like, okay, this man is right. And then there is so much proof about that you can't even deny it. So that's a fact now. So if you don't believe in remote viewing, first of all, go and see what remote viewing is, because the name is very deceptive. You think that you have a remote and you're viewing. It's not like that. It's just like a scientific thing. It is a proven thing, and CIA was using it for a very long time. And also Congress had
the problem is that most people associate it with the men who stare at goats, right, and movies like it, and that sort of ridiculed that whole project, and I think that was a psyop, right? That movie was part of the psyop to sort of to dismiss and ridicule, so that they could continue doing what they were doing from prying eyes. But many people, I think we also talked about it last time, is like, where's the evidence? Where are the UAPs? Where's the remote viewing? Right, guys, it's in front of your eyes, right? It's all over the place. Just take a look. If you're many people have a preconception about if it's possible or not, and if it's impossible, then they stop looking. They don't even look. But the evidence is everywhere. Whistleblowers have been coming out for 50 years, right? I mean, it's not like it just happened. Bob Lazar was in the 80s. Thanks to Bob Lazar, we know about Area 51, right? So whistleblowers
Yeah.
have been there from the very start. Leaks have been there from the very start. Project Stargate, MK Ultra, everything. It's lying on the street, right? It's sort of covered in a heaps of BS and
Yeah. So that argument that if government was hiding it, then why don't we know about it? We knew about it since 80. There were leaks since 80s. We know that. Actually,
just not
even
looking.
before 80s. Yeah, you just don't want to accept those things. And secondly, Stephen Greer, he in 1998, his Disclosure Project, there were like so many generals and army personnels who came out and gave the testimony. You didn't accept any of that, and you are saying there is no evidence. There is.
Yeah.
You just don't want to hear it. You don't want to see it. To be honest, in this day, you can just literally go out and see something on the sky. You want to see a UFO? Go out your
Yeah.
house. After between 7 and 9, you will see something.
Yeah, and I think everybody probably also has experienced something in their lives that they personally think is very remarkable or something wondrous that shouldn't have happened, and they keep it for themselves, right? They never talk about it because they're afraid that people will ridicule them or shame them when they say it out loud because it's scientifically impossible. And if everybody keeps that secret to themselves, like, and never talk about their own personal experience about something wondrous or amazing that couldn't have happened, if everybody keeps it for themselves, then we'll never know the truth, right? So share your personal experiences. If you have ever experienced something crazy, just talk about it, and then you notice that a lot of other people experience crazy shit all the time.
And don't care about the critics because they
On
are
their way out.
useless. Yeah, they are on their way out. Mick West and all those guys are done.
And by the way, that doesn't mean that you should stop using your reason and your critical thinking skills, right? Yeah.
Obviously, be critical of yourself, because you don't want to make a fool of yourself by correlating with something else. Like you are seeing something and you are imagining something. Just make sure that you are pretty sure what you're looking at. Because when I go out, I see a lot of the things in the sky, but most of the things I know. Sometimes I do see satellites. They look like, if you don't know what it is, you know it is crazy. Especially the planet Venus. That is very bright. When you go and Venus is the brightest star. So a lot of the time things can be crazy, but then there are actual crazy things. So don't be a fool, just be critical and then keep looking for the anomalies.
Yeah. So the scientific method still applies, but you just have to open your mind to a limitless possibilities, right? I mean, the universe is just much more crazy than we imagine, and much more wondrous and much more fun. Actually, I think this is way more fun that miracles are possible than if they aren't possible.
Yeah,
in my opinion.
Yeah. Exactly.
Okay.
Anyway,
that was the telepathy tapes. Next time, I don't know. We'll see.
We'll see.
Okay.
Well, probably we'll have a disclosure by next.
Mike
time.
Herrera. Yeah, probably Mike Herrera.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. All right.
Take care.
Bye.